But let me start out with my op-ed today from HartmannReport.com. It's titled, "Have Billionaires Outfitted Justices with Golden Handcuffs to Stop Liberal Drift?" You know, we had this story about Sam Alito that just, broke yesterday from ProPublica, that Sam Alito was on this fishing trip to Alaska with Paul Singer. In fact, we had Greg Palestine talking about it yesterday. And, just the airfare for this thing was $200,000 round trip on a private jet. Plus, it was in a fancy fishing lodge and he was there with a billionaire and a couple of other very wealthy people. Why do billionaires have an interest in Supreme Court justices? Well, the way that it's being played in the media, the suggestion is that there's some sort of quid pro quo going on here. Like, hey, we got a case before the Supreme Court. Let's take the Supreme Court justice out and wine and dine him, and maybe he'll vote our way. Like it's soft bribery. And, now this latest story, the Sam Alito's trip to Rome, was also funded by a group that had business before the Supreme Court. And they're like, there's nothing wrong with this. This is perfectly normal. No, it's not. But why is this happening? Is this happening because these billionaires are trying to engage in bribes? I don't think so. I don't think any billionaire is going to, they've got everything they ever wanted or needed. Obviously, there's a sickness there, a psychopathology. I want more. 10 billion isn't enough. I want 20 billion. I get that. But they're not going to bribe a Supreme Court justice to get what they want. It's just, that's silly. Similarly, Supreme Court justices aren't going to take simple bribes. So if it's not about bribery, what is really going on here? Well, I think I have the answer. And, I laid out a kind of a prosecutor's brief to make this assertion this morning over at HartmannReport.com, and you can read the whole thing. But, basically, what we have seen throughout most of the history of the United States is that when right-wing justices get put on the court, or certainly in the 20th century, in the last century, when right-wing justices get put on the court, they abandon their right-wing ideology once they have lifetime tenure. Earl Warren was a fanatic right-winger. He was a tough on crime, keep the blacks in line prosecutor in Alameda County. He was a three-term governor of California. He was just a total hard ass. And Eisenhower and Nixon put him on the Supreme Court. They celebrated his appointment. And then what does he do? That was in 53. In 54, he pulls together a coalition for Brown versus Board of Education, ending segregation in schools. That's followed by legalizing birth control and recognizing the right to privacy in Griswold, eliminating prayer in public schools in Engel versus Vitale, defining the right to refuse to incriminate oneself in Miranda, putting a law into place that you have right to a free defense lawyer, Gideon versus Wainwright, strike down laws against interracial marriage, Loving v. Virginia, ending a form of extreme Southern gerrymandering by requiring all congressional districts to have the same population. Earl Warren, in other words, once he had lifetime tenure, moved out of being a Republican and a right-wing ideologue and into doing what was best for the country. We saw the exact same thing happen with William Brennan. We saw the exact same thing happen with John Paul Stevens. We saw the exact same thing happen with David Souter. Over and over, we saw something very close to that happen with I could go through the whole list. It has happened over with Sandra Day O'Connor. It has happened over and over and over again with these nominees that, they get put on the court as right-wingers and then they live, once they're on the court, they live as left-wingers. Or not really left-wingers, just doing what's best for the country. Why is this? Well, because once you're on the court and the only party to which you're answerable is the people of the United States, is the general benefit of society, these guys tend to leave behind their right-wing ideology. The right-wing ideology, of course, that embraces hierarchy and patriarchy and all that sort of thing. But something changed about 20 years ago. And in the last 20 years, the appointees, the George W. Bush appointees and basically the appointees since then, and the Trump appointees, they have not swung to the left. They have stayed hard right. Why would that be? Well, in my opinion, it's because these billionaires have reached out to them and are using the most powerful social force that we have, the single most powerful way you can persuade people, which is with friendship, peer pressure. Peer pressure is incredibly strong. So it's not like, Paul Singer and Harlan Crow and Charles Koch. It's not like they're saying to Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito and mark my words, as ProPublica and other news organizations continue to dig into this, they're going to find more billionaires sucking up to more conservative, right-wing Supreme Court justices. But none of them are doing explicit overt bribes, in my opinion. What they're doing is they're trying to keep these guys in the fold, trying to keep them in the right-wing lane, trying to prevent them from doing what David Souter did, what Sandra Day O'Connor did, what Anthony Kennedy did, and the whole long list all the way back to Earl Warren did, which is deciding, hey, I've got lifetime tenure. I think I'll do what's best for the country rather than just what's best for the donor class to the Republican Party that got me this job. Now, I realize there's still a lot of people who think, oh, it's just all about bribery and all this kind of stuff. But, I think it's much more than that. I really, and frankly, I think that this is even more insidious than saying, hey, if you'll vote this way, I'll give you a luxury trip to Alaska to go salmon fishing. I mean, that's just silly, right? That's not what's happening. What's happening is, hey, you're my buddy. You're not going to leave the fold. And we're starting to see this in some of these decisions coming out. Well, not starting. We've been seeing this all along. They're staying on the right. I fully expect to see it in the case on student loan default or forgiveness.